Hey guys, so when you saw the name of this video, you might have been like, what are you talking about? Well, don't worry, I'm going to explain. You can also read my shirt if, I don't know, you want to stare that hard at the screen. Anyways, you may or may not know that last week Taylor and I both went to present work at the Children's Literature Association conference in Columbus, Ohio. And this is an international organization focused on academic research and work on children's literature and young adult literature, which you may have already guessed. Of course, I was there. These people are my people, and I've been wanting to go to this conference for a really long time. Hadn't been able to go because undergrads don't generally go to these kinds of things, but I had my thesis this year, and so I went and I presented part of it. Not all of it, part of it. It was really cool. I got to talk about Sarah J. Maas and Throne of Glass. It was awesome. But basically there was 3 days of panels, and the first 2 days there were 6 sessions with like 7 or 8 panels to choose from a session, and the last day there were 4 sessions with 7 or 8 panels to choose from per session. So you basically had to pick and choose like crazy, and of course all of it's great. You know, do you choose to go to the panel on Philip Pullman or Neil Gaiman? Do you go to the YA trends one or YA feminism? Do you go to Japanese picture books or Brazilian children's literature? It was insane. But, you know, we had to do it, and we scheduled our day like we were at an amusement park, and it was great, and it was fun, and we were very nerdy. Anyways, I have with me a list for you guys of the books that I heard papers on or were mentioned in papers that I now really want to read because there's this interesting work being done with them, and these people made me really want to read them. Some of them are old, some of them are new, some of them you probably have heard of before, but I just haven't read them. Some of them you may not have heard of before, and there's 10 of them. So I really hope that this list will be a really good mix of a bunch of things that we can all talk about together. I'm going to go through this list in the order that I heard them, so different panels, so no order other than like over the arc of the panels that I saw. These are the books that I heard about. So here we go. We're going to start off with 3 books actually from a panel on YA science fiction adaptations of Sleeping Beauty, and I do read fairy tale adaptations, but when they all started coming in one fell swoop, I kind of just stopped reading them because I was bored and just kind of felt hit over the head with so many adaptations of the same thing. But there were 3 different adaptations of Sleeping Beauty / Snow White in this that she made sound really, really appealing, so I'm just going to list them off for you. And the first one is When We Wake by Karen Healy. I did know of this book beforehand, but I hadn't read it. I didn't actually know that it was kind of Sleeping Beauty-esque, but apparently that's the case. This is a tale that features a really spunky kind of heroine, and you know, cryosleep is the main feature of these, and that was like her second favorite retelling. Her top retelling was A Long Sleep by Anna Sheehan. And I really love the way that she described this book, and basically saying that the book starts off with Sleeping Beauty, the main character, not named Sleeping Beauty, but using air quotes, waking up from cryosleep, having inherited all of her family's wealth because her parents are dead. And you find out that her parents, when they just didn't want to be parents, kept shoving her in cryosleep. So she's like 100 years old or something because her parents just would randomly decide they didn't want to parent. But anyways, it actually plays with the idea of Sleeping Beauty as a very passive heroine and uses that within the story. And she described it in a way for her paper that kind of spoiled the ending, and I'm not going to do that for you now. But even with that having happened to me, I really want to read it because it sounds like it does some interesting things all around. So the last book from that panel is actually a collection of short stories edited by Kelly Link, and it is Monsterous Affection. She spoke specifically on a second-person list story by Holly Black that was within it, but if it's edited by Kelly Link and there's a story by Holly Black in there, I don't need any more than that. I know that it's probably a collection of stories I would really love to read, so want to get my hands on that too. I also went to a panel on female cross-dressing in YA, and not in the sense of the way that word is colloquially used, but in the way that there are a lot of books where females have to dress as men and then revert to femaleness in the end. So it's using cross-dressing as a disguise versus an actual personality shift. And so there was a lot of good discussion about that, but a couple of different books were mentioned in there. Of course, Alana was one of them by Tamora Pierce, but I focused specifically on the Bloody Jack series by L.A. Meyer. This is a story about a girl who becomes a pirate. And I don't know why, but I haven't read a lot of pirate novels, and she was talking about it and describing the chain of events that leads her to become a pirate and what she does as a pirate. And of course, like I said, these papers generally did spoil endings of books, so I'm not going to do that. But it just made me really, really, really want to read this book. So I don't know if you're into pirate fiction or anything, but that is something you should definitely look into if you haven't read that and you like pirates. The other book that was mentioned in that panel, not in the same paper, was Walk on Earth a Stranger by Rae Carson. And if you followed my blog for a period of time, then you might know that I really am a fan of Rae Carson's A Girl of Fire and Thorns series. I own all of them, I love them, but when she came out with Walk on Earth a Stranger, I wasn't thrilled with the whole, it's set in the gold rush, there's fantasy elements, but it was kind of historical. And I just wasn't thrilled with the idea, but as she was explaining it and talking about the story and what's really happening there, I was pushed into wanting to read it. And granted, I've wanted to read it because, again, Rae Carson, but wasn't sold on the book itself. So now that I'm sold on the book itself, I am excited to finally get my hands on that and read Rae Carson's latest stuff because, again, her Girl of Fire and Thorns series is wonderful and amazing, and if you haven't read that, you should read that too while we're at it. Speaking of books that a lot of you maybe have read, but I haven't read yet, I was also encouraged to read Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. There were actually a lot of panels on Rainbow Rowell's work, or papers rather, both good and bad, but I was in a particular panel hearing the plot of Fangirl described, and it occurred to me how much I had been avoiding that book simply because everyone was reading it, and it was like a darling of Tumblr and everything like that, and I just really didn't want to read it because I was being told that it was so amazing by so many people, and so I had really just even avoided knowing what the book was entirely about. I just saw the cover in a post or something and I just went, ugh. But having it talked about in the setting, the way that it was talked about, and even with the negative and positive aspects that I heard over the course of the 3 days, I really do want to read that book now. So Tumblr couldn't get me, but an academic conference could. I don't know what that says about me. Speaking of books that I was told by everyone that I should read and then didn't because people were telling me to, one of my other recommended books is House of the Scorpion by Nancy Farmer. I, again, heard a lot about these books. One of my favorite professors told me I should read it, and actually he kind of assumed that I'd already read it because it was just like so me, I suppose. And I didn't read it. I hadn't read it. And then I went to a panel kind of randomly on post-humanism and young adult literature. And I was sitting there listening to this book being described and the cloning elements that come up in it and the kind of dystopian future and I guess there's like kind of a religious aspect as well, and it just all kind of interwove into something that sounded very complex and very interesting to read, and so I've also really been enthralled by that book now. I think that this is one of the oldest books on this list, but I also had a lot of fun hearing a paper on The Grounding of Group 6 by Julian F. Thompson. This is a book about a time and place where really, really rich people, have to push their kids to be the best, and there's this group of 6 kids who aren't good at something or aren't like perfect in their parents' eyes, and so their parents send them off to be grounded or basically killed. And apparently it's a novel about satire, and it's supposed to be quite funny. And basically it's about this guy who goes off to ground or kill these 6 kids, and then as he's walking them into the woods to go kill them in a cavern, he finds out that he kind of likes them and that maybe he shouldn't kill them, and then he decides to not kill them, and they all decide to blackmail their parents for trying to kill them, and hijinks ensue along the way. I don't know why I find that concept so amusing, and I don't know what that says about me, but that is something I am not interested in reading, so decide how that makes you feel about me on your own. There is actually a graphic novel on this list, believe it or not, and that is This One Summer by Mariko and Jillian Tamaki. And I didn't know that it won a bunch of prizes last year, and it's one of the more mature books to ever win a children's literature prize, and one of the longer ones as well. And so this was in a paper about discussion of how these books are awarded prizes and stuff like that. But you know that I'm not the greatest graphic novel fan, but this graphic novel really seemed to be talking about serious issues in a very interesting way. It's about 2 preteen girls. There's 2 years age gap between the 2 main characters, and that puts one of them more squarely in like child and one of them more squarely in teenager. And so they're each different, dealing with these different stages of growing up, and there's a discussion of teen pregnancy with some older girls who are brought into the mix. There's a talk about one of the girls' mother's miscarriages, so like just a real family novel and growing up and trying to find out where you fit in the grand scheme of things, not just for the 2 preteen protagonists, but for the whole range of characters that are in the book. And especially because it won so many awards, I figure it must be quite good. So between that and the subject matter, I'm very interested in reading that. The fact that it is a graphic novel actually endears it to me more at this point, which is odd for me, but here you are. My last want to read recommendation came from a panel on female bodies and female agency and sexuality, and it's actually Kristen Cashmore's Fire. This may seem odd because you know that I've read Graceling by Kristen Cashmore and I own Bitter Blue, but I actually just skipped Fire because I knew that it really didn't have anything to do with the characters of Graceling, and I knew that their story was continued in Bitter Blue. So as far as I was concerned, the only 2 books that interested me were Bitter Blue and Graceling. But the description of Fire, and specifically the uber sexualization of Fire's character and the problems she has with her sexuality, made me a lot more interested in actually reading that book, because I think that from what I have understood from that paper, it deals with some very, very interesting and important discussions about female sexuality and agency. So, gonna slot that back into my Kristen Cashmore reading list, because apparently I skipped over something very important. Those are my 10 books, but there is one book that this conference pushed me to actually purchase right away after hearing it talked about in multiple panels. And so, without further ado, I now own Nimona by Noelle Stevenson. And I am so excited about this. This is the first graphic novel I've ever purchased for myself. And since, of course, Michaela owns this, you guys can actually look forward to a joint review of this in July. So, if you want to know what my top book is from this whole TBR, it is Nimona, because I actually literally went to the bookstore and bought it. So, look forward to that joint review coming soon. And if you've read any of the other books that I've mentioned or want to read them, please do tell me down in the description whether or not you think they're actually as worth it as this academic conference made it sound, or just tell me if I've turned you onto a new book. Anyways, that's it for me today. Thanks, guys. Bye!